And we are back here on In Focus. Environmental advocates have been pushing state lawmakers to take action on plastic bags for quite some time now. They would like to see New York follow in the steps of California, which banned thin plastic bags and placed a minimum 10-cent fee on paper and thicker plastic bags. Joining me now to talk more about this, Peter Iwanowicz, the Executive Director of the Environmental Advocates of New York. Peter, thanks for joining us on In Focus.
My pleasure. Thanks for having me.
Absolutely, our pleasure. We heard from Assemblywoman Pat Fahey in our previous segment. She talked about wanting a ban and this 10-cent fee on paper bags and thicker plastic bags. Where does your organization fall on this debate?
We find ourselves in agreement with that approach. We really would like to see, and we actually lobbied for that during the state budget process, that legislators would finally address what New York State officials have been calling the scourge of disposable bags. It's a big environmental problem, big impact on our environment, and has to be dealt with. So a ban on disposable bags and a fee on those bags that people use is the way to go.
Peter, you brought some props with you, and I kind of want to show them to our viewers. You have a plastic bag here, and we were talking off camera. This is kind of a way that some businesses kind of get around a ban. Kind of explain what it does.
Yeah, so we don't like legislation that's been introduced that has loopholes, and you can get around it a couple different ways. They try to define their bags as something that could be put into a compost pile and break down, or they use a slightly thicker bag and label it reusable. And it's basically the same sort of plastic bag as you would get at the grocery checkout counter here. So we really want to see an all-out ban on plastic bags and a fee placed on other disposable bags so that people then just shift from plastic to paper. That would be a big environmental problem too.
Now, the governor's proposal, it does not place this 10-cent fee on the paper bags. It also has some loopholes. Garment bags are exempted. Deli meat bags are exempted as well. Would this be an acceptable first step, though, as far as you're concerned?
The governor's legislation is not an acceptable first step.
Okay.
There are other bills in the legislature that we support that would put not only a ban on plastic bags, but a fee on paper. But the nice thing about the legislation that's there in the Assembly and the Senate is it was also used the revenue collected from the fee to enhance environmental programs, money for local and state parks, monies for improving our environment. So the money that's collected actually goes back to a public benefit, and that's what we'd like to see.
We've seen some of the critics talk about how reusable bags aren't necessarily convenient for the consumer. Is this a situation where you're going to help the environment but going to put a lot of people out, especially when you start to talk about the indigent population? If they're having to buy a reusable bag, that might take something out of their bag, be it something they need to eat.
Yeah. So my second prop.
There we go. We got a second prop.
My wife and daughter always sort of make fun of me, but this is, a reusable bag that you can call environmental advocates and we'll give you one for free. And in terms of ease and convenience, these are reusable bags tucked into a very, very small pouch. You zip the stuff in your pocket. My wife and daughter always make fun of me because I'm always talking about bags. And I'm forgetting them, but now I don't because ours folds up into a really small square, put in your jacket pocket, your glove box for your car. It's always with you and you can remember it more easily.
Very convenient. We talk about the number of bags being used here in New York and disposed of, 23 billion a year. But Peter, are we starting to maybe look at this possibly being a slippery slope? We address the plastic bag issue, but we know that that's not the only type of plastic that's ending up in our landfills. Plastic cups, plastic bottles if people don't recycle them or return them to the bottle center, plastic straws, plastic utensils, you name it. There's a lot of plastic still ending up in our landfills. How much is this legislation going to do in the end? And what do you say to critics who say it's not going to stop there? What plastic will we be allowed to use?
Well, you're absolutely right. There's a huge problem with disposable plastics that's going to be put into our environment. So bags are a big piece of it, and we have no statewide policy on bags. You mentioned the great bottle bill where we have a nickel redemption on water bottles that has significantly reduced disposable water bottles that are showing up in our environments. And we have to start seriously looking at other areas where we have to reduce our consumption of plastic. We're going to get to a point where there's going to be more plastic by volume in our oceans than fish. And that's not really a sustainable place for us to get to.
And we've seen recent examples. I know there was one that was popularized, the whale that was caught that was dead, and there was literally dozens of plastic bags in the stomach of that whale.
Yeah, and a lot of weight. And when you have to think about it, as these plastics break down and get smaller and smaller bits, and seafood is, fish are consuming it, it's ending up on our dinner plate too. I mean, plastic is going to be there, and the chemicals of that are leaching into the seafood that we consume. So a more sustainable approach is to start at things like water bottles, which we've done, and move into other areas like bags. People should be going to restaurants saying, do I really need that drinking straw with the water, or should you tell the wait staff, no straw please? Just simple things they can do to cut down in your daily lives the amount of plastic we use and dispose of.
About a minute 45 left here, Peter. You bring up an interesting point, people's thoughts about things. The Assemblywoman touched on this as well, changing people's attitudes about it. Beyond bans, how do you get people to realize, hey, I gotta consume less plastic? What can we do to kind of get the word out about that?
Well, people should be really, understanding where it goes. When you're throwing anything plastic away in a trash bin, you should be thinking, is this material that could be recycled and turned into something new again? That's the first thing. The second thing is think about the environmental impact, the story of the whale that you just shared with me. We've all seen pictures of wildlife that's trapped in those six-pack holders. That's all plastic. It's waste. It's not breaking down. It's going to be here for a while. So people just need to be thinking about their own use and attitudes and whether or not they need that disposable plastic in their lives.
Very quickly, Peter, before we wrap up, legislatively, obviously you want a ban of some sort and then a fee maybe on paper bags. Anything else legislatively you'd like to see done before the session ends? That's
a really big one. We thought the governor was going to lean into this issue early on this year. His report came out in January. It took him 100 days to introduce legislation. That was a failure on the governor's part. But now we've got 21 days left of the legislative session for the legislature to come together and tackle plastic bags and build a foundation for future years where we have to address other sources of plastic pollution.
Peter Iwanowicz, pleasure to have you here on In Focus. Thanks for joining us today.
Great to be here. Thank you.
Our pleasure.